Beating up on billionaires won't make the poor wealthy. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, this is a bit of a unique podcast. I encourage parents and their teens or preteens to listen together. One of the things we do on this podcast is we take a current event. In this case, we're going to talk about something that's happening in California right now. And then we're going to talk about why people on the other side of the issue. So, why do liberals support this idea? Why do non-Christians support this idea if it's that type of topic? And it's really important to engage with these ideas because we have to understand that they do have an appeal, that people who believe these things are not dumb or stupid or evil. They may be wrong. They often are wrong, but we need to understand why they're wrong. If you want to debate like Charlie Kirk or ask questions like Allie Beth Stuckey, you must understand your opponent's arguments. And parents, if we want our children to go out into the world sharpened, then they have to too. Destructive messages and ideas are pervasive in our culture, and we must walk alongside our children and help them think through them, help them to struggle with these issues, and God willing, find the truth. If you want to watch the show, youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows, youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows. My children have not interrupted the podcast for, it seems like, weeks. Will the streak continue? You can only find out on youtube.com/@sharpeningarrows. And today we are going to talk about taxing the rich. Now, there are lots of proposals to do this. We're hearing something come out of New York City from Mayor Zoran Mondani specifically. But I actually want to go to the other side of the country, to California, where there's a proposal to levy a special tax on billionaires. And before we do that, we're going to have our first pause point. And that's another unique thing about this podcast. Parents, I encourage you to physically stop the podcast and then discuss these questions with your children. Remember, you are your kids' most important teachers. All right, so what percentage of the income tax do the top 1% of wage earners pay in taxes? What percentage of the income tax do the top 1% of wage earners pay in taxes? I do hope you'll take a moment and actually throw your answer out there. See what you come up with. And at the very end of the show, we're going to come back and answer that question. All right, so let's dive into this specific issue. This is from the SEIU, United Healthcare Workers West website. That's the union that's actually behind this initiative. Here's what they say. Massive cuts to federal healthcare funding are driving California towards a healthcare collapse. The federal funding cuts will strip roughly $100 billion from California healthcare over the next 5 years, leading to short staff shifts, skeleton crews left on the front lines as 145,000 healthcare jobs disappear, higher cost and lost coverage. Insurance premiums go up for everyone, and millions of Californians lose coverage altogether. Facility closures and reduced services, hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, and home care will be forced to reduce services or close down. That's what the SEIU is claiming will happen. Here's their solution. The California Billionaire Tax Act. We're calling on California's billionaires to step up and pay a one-time emergency 5% tax to prevent the collapse of California healthcare and help fund California public K-14 education. Not K-12 anymore. Sorry, kids, you're stuck. You're stuck for 2 more years. K-14 education and state food assistance programs. This would protect healthcare jobs and ensure working people and families can get the care they need. Okay, so basically the pitch is the state's out of money. These people are rich. And if they pay more, the state will not be out of money. And here are the details. Again, this is from the SEIU. The tax will be paid only by Californians worth more than $1 billion, which is about 200 people who hold a combined wealth of $2 trillion. Okay, so we got 200 people with a combined wealth of $2 trillion, and they want to take about 5% of that, which again would end up being about $100 billion. Now you have to understand, this is a wealth tax proposal. Unlike an income tax, so an income tax, you say you go to McDonald's, you make $12 an hour, and then the government says, okay, as a percentage of that, I'm taking 10% or whatever the withholding is. That's a tax on income. A property tax is, you own a piece of property, the government says it's worth $100,000. Here's our assessment. You have to pay the property tax. Yeah, the wealth tax applies to all of the assets a person has, including property and stock holdings, paintings, everything everything that these billionaires have, they put a dollar amount on and say, you're worth this much money. Now give us 5%. Now this is a initiative proposal, so the union has to go gather signatures. And if they do, which I suspect they will, then it will go to the ballot in November. All right, so let's start with arguments for the wrong side. And these are really important because you're going to hear these a lot, and there is an instinctive appeal to them that I want to make sure we really think about. Argument number one: billionaires can afford this. They're billionaires, with a B, not thousandaires like the rest of us, not even millionaires. They're billionaires. This is a 5% tax. Let's say you're worth $10 billion and the government imposes this 5% wealth tax and you have to give up $500 million. Okay, so what? Some numbers on a sheet change for you and nothing else changes in your life. Because these billionaires can't spend all their money in 20 lifetimes, we might as well, as the government, make sure that their money does some good now. All right, let's have a pause point. Imagine you have saved up significantly more money than your siblings. How would you feel if your siblings decided that you have to pay for their ice cream because you can afford it? Something to think about. All right, so we've got the first argument, which is that billionaires can afford it. And then the second argument is California made these billionaires. There's a reason they came to California. There's Silicon Valley there, the tech hub of the entire world, not the country. The world is in California. You look at the University of California higher education system. It produces many quality graduates with skills in technology and engineering. And these companies, this is not one person in a garage. Even if they start as one person in a garage, someone does not become a billionaire because they're working out of their garage. They become a billionaire because they're hiring people. And where do these people come from? Well, in California, oftentimes they come from the California education system. And if that wasn't there, then you couldn't have built these massive companies in California. And so these billionaires need to come and do their part. California made them billions and billions of dollars, and now California needs a little bit from them. Money they won't even miss. You see, no man is an island, and these billionaires wouldn't have made as much money without the infrastructure created by California taxpayers. Therefore, they need to pay more. All right, argument number 3. Well, California desperately needs the money. I read off in the opening here all of the healthcare workers where the jobs are at stake, all of the care, all of the facilities that need money to function. You're telling me that having higher numbers on a piece of paper is more important than helping people live and survive and get healthcare? Come on, this will affect 200 million people and it will help millions. This will affect 200 people and it will help millions of people. The trade-off should be obvious. This is for the greater good. As you think about those arguments, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are on the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising kids has its ups and its downs. And life is busy. Life is very busy. And this running around, these emotions can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 very busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand, and it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers. God works through prayer, so check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, another pause point. Which of the great 8 questions would you use in response to these arguments? As a reminder, these questions are tools that we put in our mental toolbox. And so when we come across an issue, we can ask these questions to find out what the truth is. Remember, teen, the most important thing isn't that you agree with me, isn't that you agree with your parents, but that you are able to think and to come to the truth. Question 1, what happens next? Question 2, has this been tried before? Question 3, is there a principle involved? Question 4, what are the trade-offs? Question 5, what do you mean by that? Question 6, is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Question 7, am I focused on the speaker or the argument? And question 8, what does the Bible say? All right, we're going to tackle these arguments, and then we'll make the case for the side that I agree with. And remember, if you had a different question, that's fine. There's lots of ways to attack these arguments. All right, so let's look at this argument of billionaires can afford it. I'm actually going to start here with question 6. Is this an appeal to emotion or logic? Because I want you to think about, why is this argument appealing? Billionaires, it's true. Okay, if you take some of the net wealth of billionaires, they can afford it in the sense that they will not be poor, that they aren't going to be hungry, that they're going to be able to go on vacation. But that doesn't make something right or good policy. We're going to get to that more in a little bit. But I want to understand that when someone says, well, they can afford it, okay, and I'm guessing that if someone came into your house, opened your wallet, you could afford to have them take some of your money, but that doesn't make it right. So you see, even though there's an appeal to this argument, it's actually skirting the issue of, is this a good policy or is this the right policy? And there's a couple of actual practical issues here that are kind of unique to the wealth tax. Remember, a wealth tax is not an income tax. It's not the company made $100 million, they paid their CEO $1 million, and then the CEO has to pay, 40, I don't remember what the top tax rate is, 35% on that $1 million. No, this is looking at all of someone's assets and saying, okay, that's your net worth. You have to give us 5% of that. And here's the problem. Wealth on paper isn't the same as having cash on hand. When we think of a billionaire, we might think of Scrooge McDuck jumping into a pool of golden coins, or you might not think of that. And you might just think, wow, Victor, you're really old. That's possible too. But you have to understand is that those numbers on a paper, they aren't the same as having those piles of cash just appear in your living room. Let's have a pause point. As a company founder sells off shares in a company, what happens to the value of that company? Now, when we ask questions like this, we have to hold everything else equal, because there could be other things that are happening that are making the company more or less valuable. But if it was just this one thing, the founder was selling off shares, does the company become more or less valuable? The company actually becomes less valuable for a couple of reasons. First, all of a sudden, the supply of shares is up. And when the supply of something goes up, the price goes down. And then there's the second concern, is that if the leader of a company has less control, the company can become less valuable because the stockholders can no longer be as confident in the direction of the company. Especially if you've got a founder who's really important to the vision of the company, to where the company is headed. And this is why these leadership transitions are so difficult for companies, is because leadership really matters. And so if you pick the wrong leader, the investors in the company go, oh, that company's not as valuable right now because we think it's going to make less money in the future. And if a wealth tax like this forces a primary owner to sell, stockholders can get spooked and think, oh, this company isn't worth as much. And then there are some technical problems with this wealth tax. This is from the Tax Foundation. It says the poorly drafted initiative creates many scenarios in which tax liability would be vastly more than 5% of net worth. And here are a couple of them. And again, this is about the way this specific initiative is written. Tax Foundation notes that the valuation can be based on voting interest in a company when they exceed actual economic stakes. And what that means is that there might be only 1% of the shares in of a company that can vote, that can, determine the direction of the company. And instead of being taxed on the market value of those shares, the way this initiative is written, it's valuing those much higher. And the second problem the Tax Foundation points out is that assessment rules for privately held businesses can substantially overvalue them. All right, let's look at the second argument. California made these billionaires. Okay, let's look at what's appealing about this argument, right? And I hope you're kind of seeing the trend here is that oftentimes arguments that you will disagree with, that I will disagree with, it's not, oh, there's nothing there. There is something there, right? California's tech hub does help companies succeed. The University of California higher education system has historically been really good. And yes, smart, well-trained employees matter. But let's go to question 2. Has this been tried before? Okay, there are 40 million people, a little less than that, around 40 million people in California. The SEIU admits there are only 200 billionaires. So here's a pause point. If California is responsible for people becoming billionaires, why are there so few billionaires in California? But really think about that, right? Because this is what the proponents of this wealth tax are saying is, well, California is responsible, so you've got to pay back California. Well, we can look around. There are tens of millions of people in California who are not billionaires. In fact, only a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of Californians are billionaires. Because what we can see is that just living in California isn't enough to make someone fabulously wealthy. These billionaires have done something unique that's contributed to their wealth. All right, let's look at argument number 3. California needs the money. Again, what's appealing about this? There is a real budget hole. The Trump administration is clawing back healthcare spending. Now, what they're not saying is that the reason the Trump administration is clawing this money back is because California has been paying for healthcare for illegal immigrants. See, they left that part out because it's a lot less great of a sales pitch to say raise taxes on these people so we could pay for healthcare for illegal immigrants. But okay, the larger point is California. Sure, yeah, there's a hole in the budget, and it could use some more money. Okay, so let's think about question 1. What happens next? The money is projected to last around 5 years. Okay, so California has $100 billion if this passes, everything else being equal, which we'll find out it's not. It has $100 billion and they spend about $20 billion a year. And then in 5 years from now, what's going to happen? Oh, California will have the same budget hole. See, this proposal won't permanently fix the problem. You've simply delayed it. And then we can look at question 2. Has this been tried before? And what I mean by this is look at other states. Florida has lower taxes than California, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is currently talking about eliminating property taxes for homeowners. Wait, what? California has higher taxes, and it's talking about a tax increase. Florida has lower taxes, and it's talking about a tax cut. What's happening? Well, you see, you can't solve a spending problem with more money because the demand for money is insatiable. It simply can't be satisfied. Now, there's a really important takeaway for our personal lives here, for teens as you think about your financial future. You simply cannot earn your way out of a spending problem. This is why you need to budget. You need to tell your money where it needs to go, just like Dave Ramsey says, because if you just spend and spend and spend, it simply does not matter how much you earn. You could earn $1 million a year, and if you don't have your spending under control, you simply won't have enough quote unquote money. All right. So let's look at arguments for the correct side. California's proposal is terrible policy rooted in jealousy. All right, we've talked a little bit about the terrible policy from kind of the technical perspective, but I'd like to look at question 1, what happens next, to talk about why this is such a disaster. Okay, California proposes a tax on billionaires. Let's have a pause point. How do you think billionaires will react to this tax? Well, we don't have to guess because we already know that the way the authors of this initiative wrote it, it applies to any billionaire in California on January 1st, 2026. Now, you may realize that date has already passed. And so for much of December 2025, billionaires in California spent their time leaving California. This is from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page both graduated from Stanford University. They spent decades working and growing fabulously wealthy in California, but each moved assets out of California before the end of last year. Many of those companies came right here to Nevada. And they weren't the only ones. This is a quote from venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya, whose name I completely butchered. But this is what he said. This is from the middle of January. More calls from friends. The total wealth that has left California is now $1 trillion. We had $2 trillion of billionaire wealth just a few weeks ago. Now 50% of that wealth has left, taking their income tax revenue, sales tax revenue, real estate tax revenue, and all their staffs and their salaries and income taxes with them. Oops. As it turns out, billionaires have lots of choices about where they live. And if you decide to tax them too much, too highly, especially on their assets, especially with a tax that could force them to give up control of their company, they will simply leave. Let's look at question 2. Has this been tried before? Has any other place on earth ever thought, maybe we should try a wealth tax? Yes, this has been tried lots of times. This is from September 2025 from Euronews. And this is a quote from Christina Anche, economist at the Tax Foundation. Although discussions about imposing wealth taxes are increasing, especially as governments seek to target the wealthy and generate revenue, the overall trend is to repeal them, she told Euronews Business. Over the past 3 decades, several countries have repealed individual wealth taxes. The number of OECD members levying such taxes fell from 12 in 1990 to just 4 in 2017. Do you hear that? So among advanced countries with advanced economies, the number of wealth taxes went from 12 to 4. And why? The key arguments focused on efficiency costs and the risk of capital flight. Capital flight just means billionaires will move away from places that are imposing the wealth tax. And so the wealth taxes often fail to meet their redistributive objectives. All right. So what we know is wealth taxes simply don't work. And if you just look at the kind of the economics debate more broadly, this is what you'll find is that the left's proposals, that socialist proposals don't work, that they've been tried all over the world and have failed. But there's actually something else. Let's have a pause point. Is there a deeper problem with wealth taxes beyond the fact that they don't work in practice? And this leads us to question 3. Is there a principle involved? If you go to the 10 Commandments, there's a couple of commandments there at the end. Thou shalt not steal and don't covet. And this is where the wealth tax goes wrong. Remember that people become wealthy by creating value for other people. People who are billionaires are not billionaires because they have scammed other people, because they've created sham companies. No, Google. You may like it, you may not, but that's a real company that's created a lot of value for a lot of people. Amazon, real company, created a lot of value for a lot of people. The wealthy have simply done the most to create more things of worth for others. And obviously here I'm talking about material worth, not spiritual worth. Wealth taxes try to make people jealous of those who have more. So You shouldn't steal. Just because someone has more than you doesn't mean that you should steal from them, doesn't mean that you should have the government do the stealing for you. And you shouldn't be jealous of people who have more than you. And again, we've covered this in depth in other episodes, but the amount of wealth in the world is not fixed. It's growing when people are able to freely exchange goods. And so people today are much better off in material terms, even if there are some people at the very, very top who have lots of dollars. All right, you might say, okay, wealth taxes are wrong, but the rich should pay their fair share in taxes. I really hope you answered that question at the beginning, because they already do. Remember, I asked you, what percentage of income taxes do the top 1% pay? Well, in 2022, the latest year we have data for, they paid 40% of income taxes. Now, they had 22.4% of the income, and they paid 40% of the income taxes. If you go to the top 5%, they paid 61% of the income taxes on only 38% of the income. So what we know is the wealthy are not just paying their fair share, quote unquote, they are paying beyond their fair share. If you enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to text it to a friend. Help them help their teenager think biblically about life and politics. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.